So let me set the stage then for the U.S. Senate race in Louisiana.
So the Senate race, I would split it into the Democratic versus the Republican side because you really do have to look at it in those two halves. Now, one of the things, as much as Democrats want to replicate the gubernatorial race last year, a very major difference is you do not have a unified Democratic Party behind one candidate.
Right.
You technically have three candidates, two of whom are serious, and that is Caroline Fayard and Foster Campbell. Now, Foster Campbell has one advantage that Fayard does not have, and that is the vocal and I would imagine the organizational support of Governor Edwards.
Right.
That makes all the difference if you're talking about trying to get contributions from Democratic donors and supporters and so forth, is that Foster Campbell can legitimately tie himself to the governor. Plus, Campbell has more of a populist mindset, which you still have a lot of Democrats in Louisiana that have that mindset, and I think that Foster Campbell can basically play the Huey Long card by the virtue of his tenure on the Public Service Commission. So right now, I would think he has the edge. Now, Caroline Fayard certainly cannot be counted out because this is kind of a factional fight within the Democratic Party where in the old days, it was Cleo Fields and Bill Jefferson who used to kind of fight for which black politician was more in control of the black vote, so to speak. In this case, it's the entire Democratic Party where you have kind of the John Bel Edwards wing, and then you have what is still representing the Landrieu wing, and they're, of course, strongly behind Fayard. So it's going to be an interesting race. The thing about Democrats, though, is that they have the ability, and I've seen it time and time again, to unite behind one candidate when it counts, and that is before voting occurs. The only time in my lifetime I could think of a fractured Democratic Party in Louisiana was back in 2003 when Richard Ayoub and Buddy Leach were kind of fighting for the same vote, and that's what, in my opinion, enabled Blanco to slip into the runoff, was you had a divided populist Democratic vote, 30% split down the middle. I don't think that's necessarily going to be the case this year. I think Campbell's going to have the edge. And, you know, one thing about Campbell, which I think this is kind of, in my opinion, an intangible that works for him, is I've seen him at gatherings, even in stereotypically Republican places, where he'll fearlessly work the crowd. That, to me, does matter if you are creating a positive or trying to create a positive impression for your campaign. So that's kind of how I see the Democratic side of the equation working out. In other words, one of the two of them is going to make the runoff. Because you do have 5 to 40% of the vote that is Democratic in Louisiana, probably more close to 40, particularly in a presidential election, which also shares the ballot with the Senate race.
Right.
The majority of that 35 to 40% is going to line up behind one candidate, and that candidate will, of course, advance to the December runoff.